So, you want to do your pick'ems, but you have 38 minutes remaining. This is a troublesome time for you in life. I didn't do a challenges stage pick'ems because I didn't think it would be necessary. I was kind of up and down about doing it in the first place, but just to quickly go through it, obviously Fluxo03. I think I had Mongols originally, but I changed it, and I'm glad I did. You couldn't have expected Mao's to go 03, given how many people had them to go through in the first place. I had a bit more faith in OG because of Dexter, but the team obviously just didn't have any cohesion there. Forza, I didn't think they would go through if they went into a 2-2 kind of game. They've consistently shown that they can't come back. 3-0 seemed correct. And as for the rest, I think despite Liquid showing pretty much the worst form ever, like they had to have been a lock-in here. And despite it being, shaky, I think at the end of the day, the point is the point. And that's the same goes for G2, for FaZe, even for ENCE. I think the people who didn't pick ENCE just haven't been watching what ENCE has been doing. ENCE has clearly changed up with Nerds, the newest edition, his individual form, the team, they've just been looking better and better. NIP, and I have a lot of faith in them in the next stage, as far as I'm concerned. But I think it's pretty obvious that with this level of competition, they should at least be able to make it into the next stage. And so we scrape through. Our coin is not at the base level, and we look at the next stage. So first of all, I would like to preface this by looking at the first round matchups. Let's talk about the team. So obviously we have Na'Vi. Everyone knows the Simple Show. It's been that way for a while now. I mean, recently, 2021 is not recent, but we had Electronic, we had Bit, some of the strongest individuals, but recently it's kind of massive drop-off in form from a lot of the individuals. Obviously the IGO changes kind of left Electronic with less form than he might otherwise want. I released an article recently talking about FaZe, Na'Vi, G2, Heroic Vitality, talking about how they have space creators, space users, how the dynamic works on T-side by looking at the stats and just giving my opinion. And what you'd find with looking at Na'Vi with that article, what I discovered is that Electronic, he's gotten a lot more aggressive because Boomich was previously that aggressive. You could imagine him going, just taking Entrim Jewels like crazy, doing what Hooksy did, but actually being individually, more proficient than perhaps Hooksy is right now. And as a result, Na'Vi was insanely dominant because if you have a player taking that many entry jewels and still being kind of a 0.99, 1.0 rating, then the insanely talented riflers behind him, Simple with the AWP, Electronic with the rifle. Back then, Bit was kind of still in great form, and you had Perfecto clutching, and that structure really worked for them. But now Perfecto can't be as passive because there aren't as many aggressive rifles on the team anymore. So by nature of the percentages, someone has to take more jewels because the person who originally took way more jewels doesn't exist. That's just kind of a little preview of the kind of things I talk about in the article. I might release a full video kind of going over that, in overlaying some clips perhaps, and discussing my thoughts there. First of all, we're going to put the big five in, not in any particular order because we don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's completely irresponsible and delusional to not put these five in, even though I will put this out there. I think one or two of these teams could not make it to the playoffs, as sad as that may seem. The way that the bracket might play out is not going to necessarily mean we get all five of these teams. I think perhaps we get something like Heroic, FaZe, Vitality G2 starting games, and then maybe a 0-2 game, and another team kind of chokes at the 2-0, and then they meet in the final game for the playoffs, and it's a heartbreak. Something like that could easily happen, so I don't think it's not the point that this 5 is automatically going to get you the 5 correct and you get the next stage. I think it's just kind of, you're going to get 4 out of 5, and it's just a safe decision to do. After this is when it gets kind of interesting. So let's look at the opening matchups. So when we look at the 0-3, now we've got a lot of kind of semi-weak teams. Obviously, Into the Breach kind of massive, I think, outlier for some people, but I actually do not think that they're going to go 0-3. Not least because their opening matchup in Apex in a best of one. Apex may be warmed up, but it's a best of one. It's Into the Breach, a lot of strong kind of individuals. If they can get a map that they want, if they can get a strong start, I think they can easily just get a best of one win. However, I think if you look at Gamer Legion, I think Gamer Legion has a very strong, very, very strong case for going 0-3. And that's because Gamer Legion's their first matchup is against Na'Vi. Na'Vi is just going to blow Game Legion out of the water. The individuals, I know I just said they're weak, but compared to Game Legion, there's no real fair comparison. Bit kind of, even though he's been pretty lackluster recently, he will farm this team just by virtue of raw aim. I think it'll be a sad story, but they were lucky to make it here in the first place. Force kind of, their mental game is just not strong enough to make it through these close games, and so Game Legion prevailed. But at the end of the day, you win some, you lose some, and I think they're just due a lot of losses, and it's gonna happen. I think if you look at the other weak teams, quote unquote, BNE, they look decent in the major circuit specifically. I think they do well against top teams because they have kind of a jarring style, and with Devil Walk behind them, they have more variety. I think they've played a lot slower recently as well. Like, they've interspersed slower rounds with fast rounds, and it's kind of working for them. We have Monty, they have strong individuals. I think best of one, it's easy for them to get one map. 9, I think they're pretty good. They even might have a shout here. We'll discuss that later. Fnatic is actually, you know, the problem is they could easily beat Nip in the opener, and I don't put too much stock in predicting the entire system using the predictor just for this, because one result, everything changes. But you can do that if you want. But looking at the opening round, I think, because that's at least guaranteed, it gives you a good idea of what might happen. So Fnatic Nip, I don't think I'm going to rest my 0-3 on that, but I can feel comfortable with resting Game Legion Na'Vi as a 0-3. And in terms of 3-0 here, now I know I just said Monty's a strong team, they've got strong individuals. So it's between a few teams here. Since I don't want to gamble these teams, the big 5 on a 3-0, I think I've seen some people doing that, and I'm just confused because if you put Na'Vi to 3-0, unless you're going for the 9 of 9, which, I mean, you're noble, but if you get if you get 4 out of 9 and you don't get the coin, no one's gonna remember you as going for 9 of 9. They're just gonna think you failed. So, I mean, you can go for the bragging rights, but if you lose, then you get the ultimate fall down. So let's just go for the balance. There's no point in resting a 3-0 on Heroic Phase, Vitality G2, even BNE Ents, Into the Breach and Apex. Maybe you could say Apex have a decent shot, but I think in terms of a team that some people are putting through, and I think they fit here, is Furia. Furia, obviously strong individuals. Art is playing a boring European style of Counter-Strike, as some people have commented on. I think it's been a long time coming that Art's style would have to change in order for the team to find success, and Case Rider's kind of made comments recently, I think, in an interview saying that he doesn't like playing so aggressive all the time, and he likes to kind of have that balance, and maybe that is what gives Furia this hot start. They obviously have the individuals to go easily in these best of ones. Monty is kind of a tough first matchup, but even though Furia, I don't put that much stock in them when it comes to top teams. I think they kind of do eat up a lot of these weaker teams, especially, you know, you have Quesarado and Yuri. They're just left, right, firing on all cylinders and taking names out of this lineup of 16 teams. So I don't believe in them in terms of a 3-2 team. I think if they get to that point, then they've kind of exhausted all of their chances, and they will be in their own heads at that point. And there's no, like, you know, super motivated reason for them to beat, like, for example, even if it's like Furia NIP in a 2-2 game, I honestly would favor NIP. Like, that's the state of Furia in my eyes. So there's that. So now we've got 3-0, I've got a 0-3, I've got all these 5 teams, but obviously we have to make 2 more choices, and this is where it becomes difficult. So I think we have to kind of go by elimination here, choose teams that I don't think will go through, and we'll see what we have left. Into the Breach, you know, it's a good fantasy, not really. You can have them measure 3-0 if you want. That's just entertaining. Fnatic, no, I think Fnatic do have a kind of a high seed, but obviously it's impossible to predict what the hell is going to happen with Buchholz, with the Swiss system, what goes up, what goes down. I think even if you just give them random matchups, they could lose to, or even the worst teams. Fnatic could lose to Game Legion, but they're not likely to, you know, I don't think they're likely to face Game Legion as far as I'm aware, so it's kind of like that. Apex, I think, have actually a decent chance. I think Apex will actually make it to 2-2 and lose, something like that. So I don't think they're a good enough team to put in the picks, but they do have a chance. I'm just not putting them there. I want to make it clear. I think Monty, no, I don't think they have the best of 3s in them against some of these teams. BNE, it's an outside chance. Ents, I think they're probably going to be what I end up on for at least one of the slots. 9 again, another shout. So I think we start with ENCE. I think it's a straightforward choice here. They've been on a steady incline in terms of form. They've had the individuals, but Nuts hasn't stepped up yet. And I think with the way that Snappy teams go, I think they're kind of due a big performance from him, especially in like a game against top teams. And so I think ENCE could be one of those heartbreakers. So for example, if Vitality or FaZe kind of go slow in the beginning of the Swiss system, they have to meet ENCE in a 2-2 game because ENCE also kind of, they played like G2 and then they couldn't beat G2 in like a 2-1 game, and then now it's 2-2 and then it's ENCE versus FaZe, and then ENCE is the one who, you know, wins that game and suddenly we don't have FaZe in the playoffs. Something like that could easily happen. And I think for that reason, I have a lot more faith in ENCE than most of these teams. And now for the final slot, I think this is probably the hardest to choose. Now you have a few contenders here. You have 9. They had a bit of a choking problem at IEM Rio this year, but you would perhaps chalk that up to experience. Maybe that's an anomaly. Maybe they will be improved. But I also think that if you look at a tier 2 team, like the tier 2 teams that have perhaps qualified to this top stage, like into the Beacon 9, I don't put that much stock in them because they are such grinders in terms of the scene. They'll be playing a lot of maps, they'll be playing a lot of officials. They haven't had the chance to do that recently because they've been boosted to the next stage of the major. And so Fnatic, I think even though they're big, the name is big, the players are the kind of players who would require that kind of super like aggressive schedule in order for them to improve. Like they were grinders. I think Mezzy, Nikodos, Roy, like those players were kind of lower tier players in the scene and they needed those officials. They played a lot, and now that they kind of don't do that, maybe that's why they're not as good. Fasher as well, playing for Ecstatic, I think, a while ago. I'm not sure, but something like that. Apex, again, not so sure. NIP, not so sure. Now, I could put Liquid or I could put 9, and I think this is where it gets really tough. I think right now, Liquid is only going to get better. I think they've had a lot of time to warm up. I think they've had a lot of time to get better. And I think they're going to be it. I know this is kind of, you know, you'd say looking at the form, they almost lost to Fluxo, right? But in terms of the individuals, I think since then the individuals have stepped up. I think we heard at the beginning, you know, Nitro not calling, but maybe by now I think he's back into the system. He's got the reps. Yekindar, if he's off the IGL, maybe he can bring a bit more form, bring a bit more focus to his individual game. I think Naf, since his terrible first map, he's definitely improved map to map, game to game. He's gotten much better. And so I think that's the pick that I'm going to go with. So overall, I think there's a lot of variance here. I think you have to have these first 5. I think that's kind of non-issue. Like you could have someone in the 3-0, but I think that's just risky. And in terms of 0-3, I think there's like 3 or 4 teams. Like Gamer Legion, yeah, but Into the Breach could easily just do the obvious thing and lose every game because they're bad. Like compared to, you know, most of these teams, they just couldn't shoot as hard and they don't have as many, you know, tactical advantages. It just kind of is what it is. Like Thomas is a relatively new IGO, new to the role. Even if you compare Thomas to like SDY played with Na'Vi, he won a trophy, you know. He's got a lot of experience in these high pressure moments, even if he's not the best IGL. Sometimes it's not even about that. Sometimes it's about, can you do anything under pressure? Do you crumble completely? Even if you have maybe your really bad calls come through, as long as you're making calls with confidence, that's better than like not making any calls and shutting down, and then your team just kind of does something, like, but they don't know what they're doing. So that's, you know, a lot of factors to take into consideration. I think BNE could actually be a shout here, but I'm not going to put my faith in them just yet. I think the problem with putting teams like BNE and like Monty and some of these other teams is that while yes, because they rely on the sticker money to fund a lot of their kind of players, the orgs, so on and so forth. Whereas if you look at Na'Vi, G2, FaZe, Vitality, Heroic, maybe they're struggling financially, but that's aside. ENCE, I think Heroic and ENCE, I think 50-50, but more often than not, the players are going to have the salary anyway. And of course, Liquid, we all know they pay a lot of money, kind of a long thing that they've been doing for a while, paying decently high salaries, probably higher than a lot of other teams that you think have high salaries. That's another point. But all of these teams, in my opinion, another commonality is that they have high salaries, they don't need the sticker money, and so they're motivated by showing good results. So a team like BNE, they kind of play for fun at this point. It's kind of maybe not a flaw, but a side effect of giving a lot of teams support is that maybe it's harder than ever to compare. Like, for example, how hungry is BNE going to be? Sorry about that, but we are back just to round off this quick little discussion. Now let's just get a bit excited about this major, I think, because despite maybe, I think we've had a lot of rumblings lately. Maybe it's just me, the kind of, you know, I see a lot of people be excited. I see a lot of people be a bit scared maybe that this major is not going to be as exciting. Production is not maybe as what they expect. The talent isn't the lineup that they would prefer, and so on and so forth. And I think if you're an industry professional, maybe you feel more strongly about that because you're connected to the scene. But I think as long as you're a fan and as long as you're a watcher of the game and an enjoyer of the sport, the esport, I think what you need to do is just spread a bit of positivity, focus on the best that we get as fans and as players of the video game. You know, let's enjoy what this last performance of the greatest game esport of all time, in my opinion. Maybe I think it's a pretty common opinion. Even people who don't watch CSGO can attest to enjoying CS 1.6. Overall, I think that's it from me. We'll see if we get a coin of good quality or not. And best of luck for the next stage. Hopefully I'll be uploading a video, but that one might be a bit more in-depth because we can make much more nuanced predictions about the bracket, and that'll be an exciting time. See you all in the next video. Keep track of my Twitter, my Substack. I think I'm going to be uploading a lot more articles as time passes. More interesting things to talk about in the future. CS2, Godspeed, and enjoy.